one way or the other. And the same thing is on medical marijuana to a point where we have so much disinformation out there. You've been a guy who's served as the Department of Public Safety. You've seen a lot of stuff there in as far as the drug enforcement, Department of Corrections. You've been around. If anybody can speak to this, and one of the reasons that we talked over the weekend, and I asked you to come on, is there were stories out there that the medical marijuana bill is about ready. They're coming to some type of agreement. And you've been involved in politics a long time. Is that your feeling too?
Well, that seems to be the feeling on the street, and there's a lot of chatter about that out there in the media. Yes, sir.
What's your number one concern?
Well, my number one concern is, and you've already talked about it briefly, is there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know people like me will get shouted down. I talked to my very best friend in the world yesterday about coming on with you, and was told that, well, nobody likes you anyway, so you may as well get on there and talk with Paul. So I said, well, that's
in other words, this appearance is not going to help you out.
No. So
well, at least he or she was honest with you. So
I will say this. At a time in our history in this country right now, I don't know why we're wasting our valuable time talking about medical marijuana. We need to be focused on the pandemic and a lot of other issues. But that aside, as you and I discussed, it's never been about medical marijuana, and I don't care what they tell you. I'm looking at a direct quote from the former director of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, a guy named Richard Cowan, who said, once there's medical access, if we continue to do what we have to do, then we'll get full legalization. That's what this is about. There's a myth out there about, well, we're gonna put this out there and it's gonna take care of the black market. Well, I can tell you that people who are suffering from the throes of addiction are not using just between 9 and 5. If you there's another myth out there, we're going to tax this and take the profit out. Well, every place that's been done, it's failed. I'll get to that in a minute. But to think that you're going to tax it and the people out there in the street are not going to go find it somewhere else where they're not going to have to pay the tax is just unconscionable. You've got stories out there, and they're not just stories. It's not just anecdotes. You can find it. There's an organization called Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Smart Approaches to Marijuana. You can Google it out there. Look at this guy. Look at what they're putting out. It's some pretty good information, and these are people who are not necessarily right-wing conservatives. They cover the whole spectrum, but you've got these marijuana dispensaries in places like Colorado who are encouraging pregnant women to use marijuana. From the social justice side of this, there's not a whole lot of difference in use among Caucasians and African Americans, but 4 times as many African Americans will be arrested for possession of marijuana as white Americans. And when you look at the placement of the dispensaries in places like Colorado, 52% of the placement of these dispensaries are in 3 counties in Colorado. 80% of the dispensaries in California, I believe that's correct, are in 20%, of the area of California.
Yeah.
So what I'm telling you is there's certain neighborhoods out there where they're not allowing these dispensaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they have an opt-out in Colorado, I do believe, or California, one of them, maybe both. So it's not like any community that wants to have it, they have to allow that in there. I think there are zoning laws and some of these things. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do in our bill, but God forbid if they do not. Now, let me say this. This whole thing was a ruse to begin with because they got some very caring people in this state, some of them from the religious community, some of them business leaders, to sign on to this compassionate list as far as the initiative is concerned. You know that.
I do know that, and I want to make it clear. This is not about religion with me. I'm a Christian. I'll admit to you, there was a time in my life when I was younger you couldn't have found enough evidence to convict me of that in court, but I'm a Christian. And as a Christian, there's a verse in Isaiah, I believe it's the 5th chapter, about woe to those who say evil is good and good is, you know the verse.
I do, and some of those people who got wrangled into this, because the sales pitch was that, Aunt Tilly, she needed this, and kids with schizophrenia, this is the only thing. I think some of the evidence that is, you're right, that it's never been about medical marijuana, the real movement behind this, is the fact that when we now begin to even hear stories from the formation of a bill that's going to mirror something like Alabama, the closer we get to the reality that legislators may be doing a true medical marijuana without smoking or in very restrictive smoking, and with all the oversights in there, the less the people who are pushing this want it. They want the revenue. They do not want to cut the customer base.
That's exactly right. And what other things people don't realize, let me say this. American Medical Association is against this. Mississippi State Medical Association is against this. They will tell you that there's no science out there that will show that ingesting something by smoke is helpful to people. The American tobacco industry is investing in this behind the scenes. They've already invested in companies in Canada. The American alcohol industry is investing in this. And the people investing in this, they're putting not millions, they're putting billions of dollars in this.
Kind of like the tobacco companies doing vaping, isn't it? It's Andy, the commissioner, Andy Gibson, sent this out, the letter, to Governor Reeves, Lieutenant Governor Hoseman, and Speaker Gunn, and basically said that he didn't want to have a part of this. He didn't think the Ag Department. But in the letter itself, it was good to see that at least he quoted also some of the percentages. He said, as you are aware, November 2020, 57.89% of the voters supported Initiative 65. It's no more than 70%. As far as 65 itself, 57.89%. Back with more.